Hi, Bobby.
Ramanaj.
Hi. We are already live on YouTube. We have about a minute to start officially, but yes, how are you doing? And thank you for making time for this. I know you're very busy.
I'm glad to do so. It's good to see you.
Okay. So we will just begin in a moment. Hi, Bobby.
Hi there.
Okay, I guess we can get started right away since everyone is here. There are some people watching this live on YouTube as well. Anyway, we will have the recording, and those who are watching live are most welcome, but there will be others who would be with us who would watch this later. And welcome everyone, and welcome Bobby. So I am Ramanuj from LawSikho, and we have Bobby Ahdieh with us. He is the Dean of Texas A&M University School of Law. And what is very exciting is that there are other things about Bobby which are very exciting. He started his like right at the beginning of his career when he was still a law student. He wrote a book on Russian law, and I believe Bobby also lived in Russia for some time, and you are an expert on Russian constitutional law. And after that, of course, in US constitutional law. And after a brief, uh, after spending some time as a law clerk, and then after that, working with the US Justice Department as a litigator, after that, you chose your career in as a professor in the academia, and since then you have been leading the Texas A&M University School of Law as the dean since 2018, I believe.
Yes.
And during your time, there has been fabulous rise of Texas A&M School of Law in the law school rankings in the US, probably unprecedented growth in rankings, and very exciting things are happening. I believe, and we'll hear from you about that. It's a very interesting situation that in India, probably a lot of people that we have spoken with haven't heard of Texas A&M University, and I thought that it's a great opportunity for us today to hear from you. The all the lawyers, it's an interesting situation. Like they have heard of Harvard, but they may not have heard of Yale, and similarly, they haven't heard of Texas A&M University. There are, and by the way, the university is very popular with engineers in India, but lawyers not so much. They haven't heard of this law school. So why don't you tell us a bit about the history of the law school, and maybe a bit about the university as well?
Sure. Well, I'm glad to. Thanks for having me, Ramanoj, and thanks to all those who are here live and to those who listen later on. I should say you left out of the bio that I first visited India nearly 40 years ago. So given the age of many of you, Ramanoj included, I was in India before most of you. My grandparents lived in India many years ago and for a long time. And so went to visit them on many occasions. And then since then have been back on many occasions and really think the world of the country. And in many ways, a lot of the programs that we are undertaking in India, which we'll talk more about soon, are a product of that, or a product of the fact that I have seen and been so amazed by what has happened in India over the last 40 years that I've been visiting, and would love for the United States, Texas, and Texas A&M and its law school to be part of that. So why in particular, though, here? First, I should say a word about Texas. So, many of you will know Texas as a big state and a state filled with cowboys. All of which is true. We're the second largest state in the United States, one of the fastest growing, both as a matter of population and as a matter of business activity. So you may have heard, all sorts of companies. Charles Schwab is a recent one. Tesla is another one that have moved their headquarters to, including many Indian companies, I should say, have moved their US headquarters to Texas, given the incredible growth that we are seeing in the state, economically, population-wise, and in other respects. That does include India in particular. So Texas has one of the largest populations of Indian expats in the United States, one of the largest number of Indian company headquarters, US headquarters or North American headquarters, including many familiar brands, have their headquarters either in Houston or in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where the law school is, or elsewhere in Texas. And so it really is a kind of a Texas is an incredibly important hub for India US relations. If you look at volume of trade, volume of business activity, population movement, so on and so forth. Then Texas A&M, more particularly, Texas A&M is actually the first public university in Texas. It predates even the University of Texas. It was the land-grant university. It is today, depending on the year, the largest or the second or third largest university in the United States. So that includes University of California, University of Michigan. The University of Texas A&M is actually larger than any of those. We have about 73,000 students within the university, including at the law school. And as Ramanoj mentioned, it's a university that's particularly strong for engineering and as a large engineering program, but it's also very strong in food, nutrition, and agriculture, in health sciences, in computer sciences, in business and finance, and increasingly, I should say, in law. So in terms of law, the A&M's acquired, the law school that we are part of, the law school that we are, has been around for about 30 years, but it became part of Texas A&M only 9 years ago. When that acquisition happened, the university invested a great deal in recruiting excellent students, in recruiting excellent faculty, and building world-class programs. So we've seen this incredible rise in that time. So it's not surprising in some sense that many will not have heard of Texas A&M Law School, because it really has only existed in many ways for the last 9 years. And it's really only in the last few years that it's risen into the highest ranks of law schools. So in the US, there's about 200 accredited law schools, accredited by the ABA. We were unranked, means we were in the bottom 50 of those 200 just 7 years ago, 8 years ago. We are today in the top 50. We're the #2 law school in Texas now. That has been a product of every year basically going up by anything from a few places to 20 or more places. And that's a trend that's continuing, and we expect it to continue. So the commitment of the university is really to create a law school that in due course will be among the top 20, top 25 or so law schools in the United States. And they're continuing to invest in that goal. We have risen more in rank than any law school in history. We've risen more in student quality than any law school in history, more in reputation, more in student outcomes. So in all of these axes, the law school has been on this incredible rise, and a rise that will continue. So you may not have heard of it before today, but I can assure you, you will hear more and more about it over the next 5-10 years.
Yes, and we in India are making sure that every lawyer in India gets to know about Texas A&M University. Bobby, what makes like in the US, we in India, we are absolutely very obsessed about ranking of law schools. Like, we have dedicated message boards where people are talking about which law school should be ranked higher all the time. So it's very curious in US, what makes a law school rank higher? Like, what are the things you have done actually that made this rise possible?
First, I say that there's lots of different rankings, as there are in India. The one that people most commonly look to is the US News and World Report rankings. There's other ones as well, but even within US News, there's the general rankings, and then there's the specialty rankings, which rank particular subject matter areas. So in the overall rankings, what I mentioned already, there's about 200 law schools. The A&M in particular was in the bottom 50. Now we've moved into the top 50 over about 7 years or so. Yeah, 7 years, I think. What are the ingredients that go into that? They look at reputation of the law school, both among employers, but also among other academics. They look at the quality of incoming students. They look at the outcomes in terms of bar passage and employment results. They look at the resources of the law school, how much they're investing financially in programs and in the students and in the faculty and the like, in facilities even. They look at the library resources. These are kind of the main ingredients that go into the overall ranking. And again, what I like to say about A&M is that if you look across all of those, we have been investing really in all of those, and that's why we're seeing this, this notable rise in the rankings over time. The specialty rankings, they survey professors who work in that field. There, again, similarly, Texas A&M is in the top 10 in the country for intellectual property and also for alternative dispute resolution. We're highly ranked also for energy and environment. for our clinical training, which is, the training of students in skills training, as well as other areas, but those are some of the highly ranked ones. That's how they do those. And then there's a bunch of other rankings that will look at primarily employment results, or will look primarily at reputation of the school, or primarily at incoming quality of the students, or at specialty areas, these kinds of things. So.
Excellent. So, Bobby, I remember that like when you first came, like when I met you for the first time, you were in India, in New Delhi, and I met you and we spoke about, possibly doing a program to help Indian lawyers to get an international exposure and something on those lines. And then we have actually worked on it for almost 2 years, and we now have a program. But before I get into that, I want to understand, how do US academia look at India, and how do your law school and you look at India, and why do you have an interest in India and doing program for Indian lawyers in South Asia? What is the interest?
Let me say it broadly, and then I'll talk about A&M in particular. So broadly, I would say, there's keen interest in the world, obviously at some level, given, the appreciation of globalization. Although, we Americans are sometimes a little provincial. And so, the joke they say, what do you call someone who speaks 3 languages is trilingual? What do you call someone who speaks 2 languages bilingual? What do you call someone who speaks 1 language American? So there is a little bit of a, we know the world is there and we know it's important, but there's not always as much attention and appreciation of it as there ought to be, is one thing I would say. Second one is that it is the case that historically, overwhelmingly the focus of US higher education and law school, including law schools, was on Europe. Then over the last, let's say 20 years, 15 to 20 years, China became the singular focus. Now it's more diversified, but in a not necessarily systematic way. I think there's not as much familiarity with India, with Latin America, with Africa. And so there's schools that are interested, but they don't really know quite what that means or what to do with it. That's not to say all schools. Some schools are doing it. And that speaks then to A&M. So A&M, we have a particularly international faculty at the law school. So we have multiple faculty members from India. We have faculty from Hong Kong, China, Italy, Spain, Germany, Israel, Mexico. I'm forgetting some, I'm sure. So we have a very international faculty. So the natural orientation of our faculty is to think about the world and think about how should we as faculty, how should our students, and how should the law school as a whole be engaged overseas. And in India in particular, Professor Srividya Raghavan, who's an Indian and US trained lawyer and academic, is on our faculty, and she's been instrumental in identifying ways in which we can explore opportunities to create partnerships and to have an impact in India, given India is such an incredibly logical partner for the US. So both common law systems, English language systems, so there's just such a natural synergy that the US trained lawyer who better understands India and the Indian trained lawyer who better understands US law and or has the credential and can work across that boundary is just better situated to be able to succeed in a world in which we know, whether we may like it or we may not like it, the so much of the direction the global economy and legal practice goes will be a function of what's happening in India and what's happening in the US, and frankly, what's happening between them. So I think there's, again, I would say in legal education generally, there's an awareness of that, but there's not necessarily a focus in the sense of let's figure out India and or how do we figure it out. And A&M, we've been lucky that given who our faculty is, and may come back also to what I said about Texas, given Texas's growth rate, Texas, it turns out, is pretty international. I don't know what the number, I think Texas would be the 10th or 9th or 8th or something largest economy in the world, if it were its own country. So Texas is itself a global powerhouse. So Texas needs to do that. A&M and the law school needs to do it. And so that's why we were excited about, I was excited to meet you, but I've been excited broadly about finding ways for the law school to collaborate more and do more good work in India.
Right. So one of the biggest challenges for us was that generally the fees of a US law school would be
Sure.
significantly higher than what an average Indian lawyer would be able to afford.
Yeah.
There are exceptions, but it's a big challenge for most of them. And then you figured out how you're going to, like, how you can do this, that in a way that students can even afford that. And we have been able to work with banks in India and other ways to arrange educational loans and so on. But it started with the law school being willing to consider how they price the course and even extend scholarships, etc. So can you throw some light on that? Like, what made you think in this line, and, like, what is the, how, I would say it's a big divergence compared to any other, how any other US law school has so far looked at an Indian market. Of course, every university perhaps is offering an online course today, but when they are offering online graduate programs, the most of the Indians cannot afford it. So what made you like? And of course, I understand what made you perhaps, but what, like, how did you work this out?
So I'd say a few different things. The first part is that the core mission at Texas A&M, I told you, is a public university. I mentioned earlier we're a land grant university. What that means in U.S. terminology is that the institution was established in order to serve the public good. That's really the function of the. Now, it doesn't mean that we do lots of things. We do that in lots of different ways, but that's fundamentally that land grant mission of the university is core to what we do. So the broad notion of can we create programs that are available, accessible, realistic opportunities for a broad range of students, that's not rocket science for us. So that's at the core of how we think about our business, right? How we think about what our mission is really is to create those kinds of things. So that's the first one. So we started with that premise. We're not a private institution. We are not trying to turn a profit or the like. And it's a functional matter. We want to create opportunity. And the question is, how do we do that effectively? And so that was the starting point. The second part was to say, look, any sophisticated business should have the ability to engage in product differentiation and the design of programs that will meet the needs of a variety of audiences. And so the notion is that there are lawyers in developing countries who are not going to be able to sustain the same price point as the resident in the developed country, be that the US or elsewhere. And so can we design a program that is of the highest quality and caliber, that's effectively delivered, that has high quality content, that produces students who are going to be effective in terms of pursuing their goals, but that is accessible in that way. So between that mission and the notion of sort of that model of sort of how we think about the business frame, so the mission and then the business model, the notion was, let's think about both design a program, pricing a program, and scholarshiping, right, of students to make it realistic for us to offer a program that students will be able to sort of participate in and get that high quality education, even though, again, they would not be able to afford that similar program if it were the standard LLM program or of A&M or some other law school. So that was really the framework and the thinking.
Right. And also the other side of that is that we have only 20 seats in the first batch, right? So that's how it works. Bobby, when you when you have a lawyer from a developing country in mind, and they're looking at an international career, what do you imagine for them? Like, if they go through this program, and you can perhaps describe what an online LLM program really is like at Texas A&M University. You have a very popular online LLM program in the US already. I think you have around 1,000 students enrolled already in that program, right? So
So in the overall programs, we have a little more than 1,000. The online LLM is not that big, but it's a large program by online LLM standards. So look, we have the blessing of, goes a little bit to your last question. We have been in the sphere of online education, distance education for some time now. So we're good at it. We know how to deliver high quality education even in that format, and how to make it cost effective, how to do so in a cost effective fashion. So, let me say, they were embedded in your question, kind of two pieces. One is kind of what does it look like? The other is what are the outcomes in some sense that we hope for the students. So what does it look like really is programmatically, we design high quality content that usually most of the students enrolled in our programs, and we expect that here too, are practicing lawyers who will continue with their practice. So the notion is not that they're suspending their practice, and that's part of what makes it realistic financially, right? Is that they continue to work, and that enables them to afford some of the costs. So the notion is that it's a combination of asynchronous content and synchronous content. That students are doing their work, but also are interacting with the faculties, sometimes asynchronously and sometimes synchronously, and interacting with their classmates as well, in both formats, asynchronously like on a chat board and synchronously in a classroom setting. And the basic theory, the basic notion is that that format allows us to make the opportunity, again, affordable, but also accessible. Because realistically, if I said, this is the schedule, you have to be here at this time every day from this time to this time, it becomes impossible for a large swath of working professionals to be able to do it. So that's kind of the basic format of what it looks like. In terms of the hope for outcomes, so we talked a little bit about the rank at the beginning. So you might think of it as kind of a growth stock a little bit. We know the trajectory of A&M, including because we know the trajectory to date. I like to tell people that every student who graduates from A&M, Texas A&M Law School, graduates from a higher ranked law school than the one at which they started. So given that, the notion is having a credential from a very, very highly ranked US law school, having a degree from there, and a known degree, an LLM degree that's a known degree, and combining that with the background, professional background, educational background, experience, work ethic that the student brings to the program. So it's not a magic wand that you attach this at the end of your name and suddenly, wonderful things fall from heaven. Your existing background, the work you put in to it is important, but the credential, in essence, becomes kind of a little bit of a door opener, right? Because to say I have an LLM from Texas A&M opens doors, but also a little bit of sets the baseline, right? So I am able to, even someone unfamiliar with Indian credentials is able to say, okay, I know that this person is in the game, right? I know that they are qualified, that they have this core base of knowledge, this core expertise, and again, given the focus of the program, at least to this point, a specialization that is valuable to me, right? Now I can evaluate their other credentials. Where did they go to law school otherwise? How much practice experience do they have? Where is that practice experience? Who are their references and what are their, so think of it that way, that it really is, in some sense, it opens the door and it gives you credibility for all the rest of your credentials to potentially be able to shine. And I'll say one more, and because I mentioned it in passing, I want to say is that the other thing that an LLM can do is specialized training. So if I want to tell a story of, I'm a good lawyer, everyone looks at my resume and they say, he's a good lawyer, I would hire him, so on and so forth. That is different than I would hire him for this work or hire her for this work, right? So the specialization also is an additional potential benefit in that if somebody is interested in a career in IP and international IP and expanding their base of clients from Indian clients to international clients, the specialized credential of an LLM focused in IP, focused on international IP, that's an added door opener or opportunity as well, I would say.
Right. I just want to mention something here. IP especially is a really good option for those who want to do international work because of the TRIPS agreement. There's a trade-related intellectual property related agreement. Now this basically there's a lot of similarities in the laws, the way copyright or patents or trademarks would work in India and in the US, it will be substantially similar. Of course, there will be different rules and different procedures, but you don't have to learn everything from scratch. And that's similar in even in other countries, which makes IP an especially good case for international practice. And not only that, there is massive work that is flowing from the US to India and India to US. There are a lot of companies in India which registered their IP in the US, and uh, there are US law firms which are engaging Indian lawyers remotely, and even engaging Indian law firms. US law firm would have a partner law firm in India, and they would be doing different kinds of work. And this is increasingly like, if something is really advanced stages compared to every other area of law practice, that is IP, where this kind of US India cooperation is already in a very strong, it has reached a very strong position already.
And can I just generalize it? I think that's, in some sense, the broader thing we've talked about why a US credential from a highly ranked, high quality law school is valuable speaks to that broadly, right? That broadly, it's the case that the practice of law is increasingly global. But Ramanoj, you're absolutely right that there are some areas where we're already done. In other words, it's not that it's becoming globalized. If today I teach intellectual property law and I only teach Indian intellectual property law or US intellectual property, I have not taught you IP law, right? As a functional matter, you are not competent to go out and practice IP law, because the reality is that IP works now across borders. And so I'm your Indian IP lawyer is not going to suffice. I'm your Indian IP lawyer, but I have a knowledge base and expertise that will allow me to interact with and to effectively help you navigate the US and European and things. So the framework of this program, with its comparative and international focus, really makes eminently good sense. Because it really is an area, as you said, not just that's growing in general importance, but an area where you cannot competently practice without sort of a meaningful comparative and a meaningful international perspective.
On that note, can you tell us a bit about why Texas A&M School of Law focused so much on IP law? Because I think you have one of the largest IP faculties.
Yeah. So I'd say first starts with the university, because you mentioned engineering and I reiterated it. So A&M as a whole is an incredibly strong STEM school: engineering, computer science, health science, et cetera, et cetera. So there is this real focus on those areas to begin with. That's one piece. So when the university acquired the law school, when the law school became part of A&M 9 years ago, that was very much the notion. The notion was, let's make intellectual property and technology a central pillar of strength of the law school. So the result of that was we hired a huge group of IP faculty, and we've actually grown it since then. So we have, I think it's either the largest or one of the 2 or 3 largest IP technology faculty groups in the United States. I think it's 7 or 8 faculty we have who work in that broad arena. And we continue to bring in more, I should say. And the notion of that is that we want this to be an area where when someone says, I am interested in intellectual property, their response is, you should think about A&M as a place to go to law school, as a place to teach, as a place to invest in, as a place to hire from, these kinds of things. The result of that is, again, I told you there are these specialty US News rankings. We've been in the top 10, I think, for the last 6-7 years, where I think at the moment, number 6 in the country, in the United States, for intellectual property law. And it's worth noting, intellectual property law is an area that probably every law school in the country, in the United States, does and works in. So that means if you think about we're number 6, think about the number of top law schools that we have a stronger IP program in. So if you're interested in that, A&M becomes even more of a logical place to get your degree, to study, and so on and so forth.
That's great. So, if you could talk a little about generally the idea that people have regarding an online program is that it's like anybody just can get into in any online program. There's no limits. There's no limit to the classroom size, but you have taken a different approach. So what would be the admission criteria? How do you decide who gets in?
I'm going to do the first, again, 2 things were in the question. So first, let me speak broadly. It's not a MOOC, right? It's not a massive whatever online course. These are regular classes, and our general principle behind that is we want to provide a high quality product and education that will ensure that the students who come out of the program become the best advertising for the program, right? Both in terms of the quality of the education they received and their kind of what they have to say about it. So for that reason, for us from the beginning, it was clear that the notion was not cattle call. Everybody come in, everybody get in a big thing, and we'll just like have somebody lecture and fill out some things online. The notion was we want to regulate section sizes. We're going to regulate sort of participation and evaluation. We have all these systems to make sure that people are doing the work and keeping up. You're graded on those things, just as you would be in a thing. And I will say, we do occasionally get students, because I told you we do a lot of this. Students who will like partway through say like, what's happening? Like, I thought this was just like a, hi, show up and wave, and at the end you get something. And we make it very clear to them, no, sorry, no such luck. So it is work. I mean, you really have to, nobody should do this unless they are ready to commit to being a graduate degree student for the duration of the program. So we really designed it to ensure that students are getting that kind of attention and thing. And it's worth it. It's, if we have more students, we add more faculty, and we have more sections, and great, that's a good thing, right? So that's the general philosophy behind it. To admissions in particular, then what that means is that we want, just as we do with our residential programs, we want excellent students, because I don't want students to come in and then not complete the program. I don't want students to come in and fail out of the program. I don't want students to come in and get through the program, but frankly, be mediocre ambassadors for the quality of the program. So our notion is very much that sort of we are looking for high quality applicants, and as much as anything, high quality applicants who want to do this. They're not doing it because, oh yeah, it's, I guess I should do this because everybody else is doing it, or I guess I should do it because my boss told me, right? We want students who really are passionate and excited about it and want to participate in that regard. And we think that if you look at India, that's the reason we're doing this in India. If you look at India, we're starting, I should say, in India, and then we'll expand from there to other countries, or are expanding from there to other countries as well. We think that there's a critical mass of students who have that drive, that passion, and given the state of the legal market in India, would benefit from this distinguishing credential, right? That in a competitive market with lots of law school graduates in India, having a credential from a highly ranked, high quality U.S. institution that is in one's area of focus and specialty, that will be there. So those are the students really that we are trying to find and recruit.
Okay. I want to take you to something that a new development that has happened recently, remote work, right? And remote work has opened a lot of international opportunities, because if you are working remotely anyway, at some point you'll think of a bigger talent pool and you want to tap into that. And it has happened in LawSikho. We have been hiring from many different countries. We have people in Europe, people in Africa, and it makes sense because you are getting a much bigger talent pool. So what is your thought on that? Are you seeing any of those trends in the US in law? What is your experience?
Well, so obviously, again, I think it's probably still too early to predict the scope of the trend. I don't think there's any question that on the back end of COVID, in the sense of in 2 years and in 5 years, whatever, that we will have more of that than we had before COVID. Will we have a huge amount more, or a moderate amount more, or slightly more? I don't know. But I think we're past the point where there will be some of that. We know that there'll be more of it than there was before. And even if there's a little more, it opens the door to what you're saying, right? Because I say, look, I want most of my workforce back in the office. But for these functions, there's no reason for them to be here. So for those, I'm going to run. And if you're in that area, if you're in that zone, then you are now facing a more competitive marketplace and more opportunity, right? Depending on who the employer is, where the employer is located, this kind of thing. I don't know where we will be from here to here to here. My expectation is that if all of us think back 3 years ago and say, how much of our time was wasted on commuting? how much of our time was wasted on unnecessary travel. Probably something closer to this middle range is more likely than this, right? And then again, still in the United States, lots of chatter about that in the legal profession, and obviously in the business community and academic community as well, I should say. So then I agree with you. What does that mean? It means functionally, if the talent pool is broader, right? So right now, everyone is focused on the idea that workers have options and they're able to demand more of their employers in terms of flexibility on work location and remote work. But the truth of the matter is that, like all trends, that there's a cyclical quality to them. That worm will turn in due course, and the trend will shift the other direction. That employers will say, you know what, we figured out a way to do this remotely. So yes, your position can be remote, but it turns out I can get someone better than you to do it. I suspect there. So I think we are going to see what you're describing, where it will be important for workers to be prepared to compete with broader geographic range. And I'll say two aspects that's relevant to this program. One is the very fact of having gone through a high quality remote or distance education online program is helpful, because you are, in some sense, you have greater experience and exposure, whatever. That's one. But as importantly, and the one you're really, I think, focused on, is the idea that that I have a credential that now makes me an attractive prospect to the employer in location X, Y, and Z. Now, there will always be licensure issues. So if somebody is engaged in the formal practice of law, there will be issues of what's required for licensing in India and in Europe and in the United States and in Canada and in Japan or wherever else it is, right? But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of work that can be done short of licensure. I mean, even without licensure. And that will vary also across country. And so I do think, again, you are highlighting properly kind of an opportunity, that a set of opportunities that will arise, and those who have credentials that help them work across borders or across geography, I should say, will be well positioned to take advantage.
And the credential really brings trust. So I want to just share with the whoever is watching, I want to share something that happened in the last 6 months. So we have had around 50 organizations from the US, including individual lawyers and small law firms, hiring remotely LawSikho students. And they haven't done a US course as such, but they have been hired. And in fact, last month from UK, there were 20 jobs from UK that were there. And not only UK, we have had students getting jobs in Dubai, in Australia, in Canada, in multiple countries. And now one thing they always face, Bobby, is that they start doing work and they're very excited. But after 6 months, 1 year, they hit a plateau. Maybe they're earning $10 per hour or $8 per hour and $15 per hour. And then they are not getting any more high-end work because they are doing very basic work. And they have naturally a desire that I want to do more. And there is a lack of credentials and trust that becomes a barrier. And we hope that this program kind of creates that recognition that when somebody in internet, especially in case of IP law, when like every country in the world, like no matter where you are, if you are a business, you want to register your IP in US and you have US IP. Like it's always like that. If you have patents, you're not going to just register in China or just in India. You're definitely going to register in the US. Now, there is a huge global demand for US IP knowledge. Now, if you are somebody who has that knowledge and you can show that through a credential that, okay, I have got a degree from a top US IP law school, which has that kind of recognition for its IP education, that we believe would make the job much easier for you to create that, establish that trust and get the foot in the door, right? But I think after that, there are a bunch of things you can do, like apart from your LLM degree, you can also potentially write a bar exam in the US. For example, those Indian lawyers who are registered as a lawyer in India, may be able to write the California bar exam. Some of them may be able to write the New York bar exam if the New York bar allows them to write it. You have to apply to see, and many people get accepted. And there are many of our students who are writing the solicitor qualification exam. There is NCA exam for Canada. There is, and of course, after NCA, you can write bar exams in Canada in different provinces. Now, this also is a serious opportunity, because I believe that if you combine a LLM degree like this with a bar exam qualification, that really opens up the entire world for you, because then you would be a licensed US attorney. So any thoughts on this that you'd like to share?
So again, so I again, so look at, all professional development in some sense is a matter of expanding what you bring to the table. So there's no question that the credential does good work. And as you described, there's opportunities if you meet the qualifications to potentially sit for various US bars as well as ones overseas. Again, I would emphasize though that the initial thing you describe of kind of we'll call the glass ceiling, oftentimes that is alleviated by, you were using the word trust, right? I would describe it like familiarity, right?
Right.
So the fact that someone said and say, oh, you have a LLM degree, and I know what that is. You have an LLM degree from Texas A&M Law School, and I know that that's a highly ranked school. You have an LLM degree in intellectual property, and the content of the curriculum you did is familiar to me because that's what I do on a daily basis. You can see how the person who has hit that glass ceiling, now suddenly the person on the other side of that line says, okay, this person, I expect, I hope, I think will be able to do the work that's on the other side of that line, right? So again, I don't want to do this, don't disagree with you that there are lines that will require bar qualification, but I wouldn't overstate that as the singular line. I don't think it's, you hit the ceiling and because you're not a member of the bar, you can't go any further. No, the truth of the matter is, even among members of the bar, they do an incredibly broad range of work, right? That is a function of their credentials, their degrees, the perception of the schools they went to, the specialized knowledge they have. You see what I mean? So again, that's where, again, I would say, again, I would still reiterate the importance of those elements in addition to them sitting for the bar exam. And the one other piece, again, I would repeat what I said earlier, that it is the case that what you want is you want the tools in place to allow your full capacity to be revealed, right? So what does that mean? It means I don't want, when my resume goes across the line, for somebody to say, I don't even know, what do I do with this, right? I want them to look at it and go like, okay, that's interesting. They have an LLM from Texas A&M. Let me see the rest of this. Oh, they've done this kind of work, right? That's what we're shooting for in some sense, is that, again, it's not just any formal accreditation or degree. It's that the body of your work you get full credit for by virtue of having the credential, the recognition, the recognizable credential, and hence the trust that I'm going to look at everything else and evaluate it meaningfully.
Great. So, if there are any students who are, I think there is a difference between how somebody who's a recent law graduate and somebody who's mid-career already looks at an LLM. Can you share from your experience, how it helps young graduates who are recently joined the profession, and also people who are already in the profession for a while? So do you see a difference, and how is it?
In some sense, I've been talking about, a lot of what I said has been about the not focused on, but has been emphasized the mid-career professional. Because the mid-career professional, in some sense, is where what I'm describing, it's a supplement, right? That again, sort of it's an additional layer that opens the door, as I said, and gives you credibility and trust and so on and so forth. So what about then the entry level person? So the entry level person, in some sense, it's the same principle, but there's a slightly different calculus, right? You are making an evaluation that I want to establish my brand. If we focus on the current concentration, we will have more over time, but for now, international IP, and comparative IP. So for that concentration, I want to build a career in this. I want from the very outset to advertise to the world that I am an expert in this area. That's hard to do at the outset if you don't have practice experience. So if I have done IP for 5 years or 10 years, and now I want to increase my credibility with foreign companies, foreign employers, law firms, around IP, here this additional credential helps you do that. At the outset, you really are, absent the credential, you're a clean slate. So somebody says, I need somebody who can work on do my IP work for me. Even if you've done a bunch of classes in IP, even if you have a certificate in IP from your initial first law degree, that is less likely to be effective than I have taken the further step, the optional or the elective step of getting this master's degree credential. That now suddenly the employer says, okay, this person really is an IP, as opposed to
really invested in IP, yes.
Yeah. That you're showing your commitment to it. And if what they're interested in really is not hiring a good smart lawyer, but a good smart lawyer who really is committed and engaged in this work because that's what they need, the credential helps with it. So I think the other things still stand. It still is a door opener, and it still helps to sort of establish a level of trust. But I think for the entry-level person in particular, the specialization piece is important because it's really going to be the primary tool by which you distinguish yourselves from your fellow graduates, right? So if we look at, we're all new graduates or we're all 1 year or 2 years out, what distinguishes you from me? It can't be that I have practice experience because 1 year of practice, who cares? Or 2 years, even who cares? Or none. But I took the added step of getting a degree and a specialized degree in this area and a US degree and from a highly ranked law school. Those things potentially are very useful for the person making their early start.
Right. And I also feel, especially for people who are working for some time, they need a bit of intellectual stimulation.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right too. And I do think, again, the other one with maybe it helps with both. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't distinguish. There's also the network kind of element of it, right? That we expect and are hopeful this program will grow, for example. So the network is broadly Texas A&M, and it's more narrowly Texas A&M Law School, right? Which will have lots of programs and grow and have brand awareness in India. But then even within this program, fellow graduates of this program become kind of a referral network and become employment network and so on and so forth. So I do think that piece is also important to note. And I think that can be true of both the mid-career participant as well as the entry-level participant.
Many those who a lot of people who are considering doing an online LLM sometimes are told that why would you do an online LLM? Do it physically. Physical LLM is better, and an online LLM is not as reputable. In fact, it seems like a shortcut. So do you have any thoughts on this? We know that in recent times, online LLM has become very popular. In India now, there are a lot of people doing online LLM. I believe in the US also, it's extremely popular. Texas A&M University's online LLM in the US is very popular, right? So what is there, what is your thought about this online, offline differentiation? Or do actually, given that this is not your primary degree, this is an additional credential, do employers or clients really care? Anyway, your degree doesn't mention it's online or offline, but does this thing really matter?
Sure. So first of all, I'd say is what you said is that, again, the degree doesn't, it's not a online LLM versus an LLM residential. There's no such thing. But that is a function of the fact that the program goes through all the same accreditation and review and curricular approval steps as the residential degree does. So that really is a matter of quality, right? So does quality matter? Of course, quality matters. On the other hand, does modality matter if you hold quality constant? No. Why would it? It's a strange notion that if I said, if I talk to you this way versus I talk to you sitting in that chair with you sitting in this chair, you're going to learn something different. The modality, as long as the quality is there. Is the quality there to maintain your attention, right? For me to provide high quality content. So that's the first thing I'd say is that, again, there are online programs that are low quality. And if it's a low quality program, yes, it's not, you shouldn't do it. But to be clear, there are residential programs that are terrible quality, and you shouldn't do those either, right? Okay, so that's the first thing I'd say. Second one is that I do think COVID has changed the world, right? In the sense of pre-COVID, I would say, my guess is that 80 to 90% of people had zero experience with anything like this. And so as a result, the closest they came to is, FaceTime phone calls on their phone, right? So remember, when FaceTime comes out 5-10 years ago, whatever it was the most amazing. The idea that you can talk to someone and see them at the same was like mind-boggling. Now, 99% of the population of the world have done some version of this for a long time. So I think there's an awareness that if the quality is good, the delivery, again, shouldn't make a difference. So I think that for employers, they're not, okay. But then the last piece I'd say is that even if at the margin there is a difference, the question is, what is a realistic opportunity? So do I think it's great for somebody to be able to come to the United States and spend a year doing an LM? Sure. I mean, I'd love to come to India and spend a year too. Unfortunately, I can't. I have a job, I have a wife, I have 3 children, I have a house. And it's not that, so therefore, this is back to quality. It's not, so therefore I'm going to do this. It's, look, it's like this. So as between the two, are there benefits to the resident? Of course there are. It would be really cool to live in India for a year, right? On the other hand, if this is similar in quality, are there benefits to this? Yes. I keep my job and my wife and my children. So anyway, so that's the context in which, again, for me, I would not want to tell anyone, even though we have an online program, and I hope you won't be mad at me. I don't want to tell anyone, yeah, residential, what a waste of time and money, whatever. I don't think that. I think it has benefits, but you should be realistic about, for your life, around resources, what it costs, flexibility, desire to remain in the workforce, which is an important thing, right? I mean, continuity of employment is an important thing. And so if you add those pieces together, for many, not all, but for many, a high quality online program becomes not just an okay option, but not just even a good option, but the best option, right? It is the right choice for them. And so that's really the folks that we want to make sure. But I wouldn't, again, to your baseline question of, reputation, whatever, I'd say, again, yes, you should not do a bad quality program, which can be done either residentially or online, right? You should do a good quality program, which can be done either residentially or online, number one. But I also, the reputation piece of like, oh, online is kind of lowbrow. I think that COVID has kind of killed that. I mean,
why are so many people doing online LLM all of a sudden? Like, you have seen a huge spike in your law school as well, and we are seeing that in India. So what has suddenly contributed to this?
I'm going to give the broader one. The longer window is over the last 5 to 10 years, the quality of both the technology and the learning science has come a long way, right? So we are, bluntly put, very good at delivering. There's research now that shows that as much as you can control for it, learning outcomes are oftentimes better in online programs than they are in residential programs. You say that and immediately the first reaction is like, no, that can't be the case. But it's not crazy to imagine. If instead of, I have to show up for class when you want me to show up, right? Even if I have no coffee, even if I'm tired, even if whatever else it is, that has an impact on it. Think about the distractions. I'm sitting in a room by myself with the door closed over there, as opposed to I'm sitting in a room, there's 20 people over there, they're having a conversation, the people over there are laughing at something. So it shouldn't shock anyone that they think, but we have gotten good at the technology and good at the learning science to be able to deliver online education in a high quality fashion. And that's really what we're doing at A&M. And that's the reason why there are, in fact, 600-700 students we have now in our online programs. But then the second piece, I do think the COVID piece is a part of it. I think the growth of the last few years is not just, I can't do it residentially because it's not realistic to be able to do it, but also, frankly, the recognition that this isn't so bad. You and I are good friends. although we have only spent whatever X number of hours together in person, right? We have spent hundreds of hours together in this format, right? But I know you well and you know me well. So it's just that I think the ease with which I would sign up for an online degree is greater because of this conversation, right? Because I know that it can work in a meaningful way.
There's something I want to highlight here about online programs. And we get this question all the time because we are an online education provider. People ask us, why can't you do this physically? And even if we think of this online LLM program, like I know that we have plans of inviting experts from almost every country in the world, right? Who's going to, like, people who are going to come and show hands-on how to do the work in their country. Now, I don't think even, Bobby, even in Texas, you could have like you actually fly people down from Tokyo or from Barcelona, or I don't know, different cities.
Sure.
Like in London, it wasn't really possible. The other part of it is this, that because LawSikho is also a part of this program, what we are able to offer is that suddenly you don't have to, I mean, sure, if you studied in the physical campus in Texas A&M, you would have been able to write the Texas bar, but now you can write maybe 3 different bar exams, and you can write all of them if you wish, and we can extend all of those training programs. So that's a part of it. And also I feel that when, for most, like you said, for most people in India specifically, I want to talk about our market research. When we started talking to people, we spoke to banks, we spoke to NBFCs, we spoke to the students who want to do their LLM. I would say around 80 to 90% of law graduates, almost everybody want to do an US LLM. That's the fact. Like, there are a whole lot of people who would like to get an international exposure, go to the US. If the money was available, if they got a scholarship, they would do it. And I think that's great. Like, there are things you cannot, like, there are things you cannot do online. Like, you can really experience culture and get to know people, and there may be things that would happen in your life if you were actually physically there. But the cost would be, like, in Indian rupees, something like 50 to 60 lakh rupees. And there is no way a bank would even give an education loan of that much amount unless you can provide collateral which is of a bigger value. And it is not simply, for a lot of people, it's simply not available. And even if they wanted to, they couldn't do that. Just they do not have the resources. And the way I see is that if you want to go spend a year in the US, it's very much possible. Like, if you actually do the LLM or figure out a way through some other channels, how you're going to do international work, you are a successful lawyer. There's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't get a visa, especially if you have clients in the US, you're working with US law firms, maybe you're helping some startups, maybe you're helping some Indian startups in US, or maybe you're working with US startups. There's no reason why you wouldn't get a business visa or some other kind of visa to go actually spend time in the US. And I think that is more realistic for a lot of people, that you get started. And this is an amount that you can actually get an entire education loan, which you can pay over 12 years. So I think that makes a huge difference. Of course, if you have the resources to do a physical LLM in the US, probably you should do it. But if that is not available to you.
But again, can I push back slightly again? I just want to say, like, it's not, remember, there's cost beyond the dollar cost.
Sure.
So the question is, are there benefits to continuing your professional work, which is hard to do when you are in a full-time residential program in another country?
You lose your 1 year's income as
well. There are family things, and other things. So I actually think I neither want to say that online is better, nor do I want to say that, again, holding costs, that residential is better. There are benefits to it, although those benefits, I think you were suggesting, you may acquire those in other ways as well, right? So there may be opportunities to come and travel and spend and, whatever, be for 2 weeks in a location, or a month or 2, or whatever, these kinds of things may present themselves. You can have that piece of it as well. But that's what I would say is the balance. It's not necessarily if you can afford it, do residential. And if you can't afford it, do online. I would push back slightly on that. I would say assess your circumstances, including financial, but also professional, family, interest, these kinds of things, and then make the decision about whether this path or this path is the right one for you.
Great. Okay. One major question that one thing is that our questions are open. The chat on YouTube is open. Anybody who's watching live has any question, you can ask your questions to Bobby. I will pass the question on, and Bobby would answer them. But we have not a lot of time left actually. But is there any question we can take from here? Okay, how to make a CV, which is really good for getting a scholarship.
Great. So again, I do think the more you can kind of think about not necessarily the content, because the content is the content, and you shouldn't, obviously you shouldn't make things up or exaggerate or any of this, but thinking about what is the template, for lack of a better word, look like for a CV in the relevant market of interest. If I was making a CV for India, I would say, let me go call a few professors in India and say, send me a copy of your CV, right? And I don't have to copy them exactly because my credentials are different, right? But tracking the template and the format so it's familiar to the audience, I think is important. So that's one thing I'd say. And the second one is emphasizing the right things, right? Emphasizing the things that will resonate. So educational experience, work experience, background, these kinds of things. And explaining them, right? So don't assume that the reader knows what X, Y, I was this kind of fellow. In India, that might mean everyone, but it won't mean necessarily to the audience here. So make sure you're explaining the things. Will be one other piece.
Great. Somebody is asking, have you seen any of your students who have done an online LLM have really succeeded, especially from India or any other country?
So I'm not sure I know in general, yes, I'm trying to India in particular, a particular country. I don't know enough the specifics of that, but no, we've had pretty good success. Both in terms of the student who comes in with an existing career, they have a job, and then they do our online LLM, and then from there they are able to sort of, as a matter of promotion, speed of promotion, doors that open with that employer. Or with another employer too. But we've also seen the door opening, kind of the person takes LLM and that then suddenly opens doors that weren't open them previously. So yeah, we're seeing that. Again, I don't know that I could say India in particular. There may be, but we'd have to look. Remember, this program itself is brand new. So not from this specific program, but from our online LLM in general. We have a good mix of both domestic US and international students, and we have generally seen they've seen very good success in both of those categories.
Somebody's asking, if I do an online course, what kind of, can I get a work permit to work in the US? What would the path look like? Yeah,
so again, so for a work permit, you need a sponsor, right? So again, so that what usually happens, I think it tends to be with a program like this is the credential, the degree opens the door to an employer who says, I'm going to bring you on in a remote capacity or distance capacity, the online capacity. You're doing good work for them. At some point, they say, we want you to come and be in residence for 3 months or 6 months or a year or whatever else it is. And then or perpetually. And so we're then sponsoring your visa for you to be able to come and work for that period of time or indefinitely.
Yes, absolutely. We have several students like this who have been given the opportunity to move to the US and even several other countries. After they did a very good job for some time on the remote mode, they were called and invited to and sponsored for their visa. So I think we are running out of time. Maybe we can take one more question. Is there any question that is still there? What would be, okay, there's a question on what would normally a US online LLM cost and what is how is this different? This is the question. I don't know if you can answer this. It's a general question.
I can answer generally. I can say that sort of, obviously it varies widely, right, between public and private and across institutions. Our online LLMs, generally are running in the 30,000 some, 33,000, 35,000 kind of is the broad range of where they are priced.
$30,000 to $35,000. So that's what you're saying.
It's 35 the exact number. So it's that range.
I have even seen like $60,000, $50,000 kind of pricing as well.
Yeah. And there you go. No, they're clear. There are schools that it's 50, 60,000, or more. And so then we have tried to price this in the mid-teens is kind of what we aim for. So Ramanoj, you may be able to say the exact sort of price.
$14,000, which is actually like remarkably, like I don't think there's any other online LLM program at this kind of cost. But there's also another factor, which is that, if you are doing this program, there is a bunch of other courses that you get from LawSikho as a part of that, and also LawSikho's placement support. So that also makes a difference, I feel. But is there any other competitive course that you know of that is of like even in the US, your prices are much higher for your LLM program. So is there any other university which has similar programs? I haven't found any. But
I don't. You mean not in the US, or you mean general?
In general, or in India, or like at this kind of a price point?
I don't look. My only point of reference is to say that goes back to your early question, Ramanoj. Our goal was to make this as accessible as possible. And so, as you know from our conversation,
so we can say this is the most accessible LLM program.
That was the idea. So I'm not aware of them, in part because we made a point of not being them, right? The notion was, if that's where they are, how do we make this even more with scholarships and pricing and so on and so forth? How do we make it even more accessible? So that really was the notion. So I'm not aware of ones that have done that. But I also don't overstate that. That is fundamentally what we do for a living, right? The A&M, A&M is a university, fundamentally is in the business of providing high quality education to a broad range of students and professionals. And so in that sense, this wasn't like, oh my God, how do we do this? It was like, this is what we do. So in this case, for this audience, how do we do that? And I'm glad that we've been able to come up with a way to do it at a price point that I think is very competitive, if not, below market kind of thing.
Yeah, I believe that it's a one-of-a-kind opportunity for those 20 people who would get that. Like it's
that's the hope.
Okay, there's a question from Balakrishna Prabhu Nalendran, and he's an IP professional. He's asking that if I am not a law degree holder, but I'm an IP professional, is there some opportunity for me?
So I'd have to think about it. We have to sort of look into it, and again, via Ramanoj or otherwise, we can check. The LLM is meant to be an advanced law degree. We have A&M Law has, although it's not in this same format, has degrees that are intended for as a first law degree, right? So it's a Master of Legal Studies, it's called. That's not this same degree, and it's not priced the same. It's in our general category of degrees. So we'd have to look and see if there is some way to do it. There may be. I don't want to promise you in this format, but there may be. Sometimes there's ways around credential and this kind of thing. Professional background, that's a substitute, but I don't want to promise that. We'd have to whatever. So via Ramanoj, if you want to reach out and we can kind of check and see, are there possibilities?
Great. Thank you so much. I think we have overshot the time by 7 minutes, and we are going to wrap up. Thank you so much, Bobby. Really appreciate you finding time for this. And this was very, very insightful. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Great working with you, and great having you all here. And again, look forward to meeting many of you in our program.
Thanks, Bobby. Good night. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.